big offseason story. Anthony Richardson heads into year 3, and they signed Daniel Jones to a 1-year, $14 million contract for the Colts to come in and to compete. It is a legitimate competition. And again, I don't know what it comes down to, if it's literally who outplays whom, or if the Colts are kind of leaning toward, hey, we're moving on from Anthony Richardson. That's why Daniel Jones is here. And we think in year 3 of Shane Steichen that they can maximize this roster and actually make a little playoff push with Daniel Jones, whereas Anthony Richardson is just far too inconsistent to put out there for year 3. What are you looking for in this battle, and how do you think this thing shakes out?
Yeah, and of course, Richardson has already given Jones, a leg up by getting hurt, missing some of the offseason work, and Jones has been taking all the first-team reps. So, I feel like they want Richardson to win this job. Like, it's a bad signal of the state of the Colts franchise if Daniel Jones wins the starting job from their, quarterback of the future, and you've got to roll into the season with Daniel Jones. Now, I think in the balance of probabilities, Daniel Jones might be the best quarterback they have on the roster. And actually, given the state of the roster, I think Daniel Jones plus that roster, plus Shane Steichen, a coach, might actually equal some quite good things. And might be a career year from Daniel Jones and could be enough to take the Colts to the playoffs. And, so from that perspective, it might actually be fine. But it does sort of rather throw them into chaos if that's the result, because sure, you might make the playoffs. Sure, you might, overachieve relative to expectations. But you do then enter next offseason with, like, what do we do now? We're quite a reasonable team, but Daniel Jones, our quarterback, and how good do we feel about that even coming off a career year? Like, you're in the same tricky position the Giants were in a few years ago, and they made the wrong call.
Sometimes I forget all of the various takes I've had throughout the offseason, but we certainly discussed the possibility that Daniel Jones goes out there, plays well enough that halfway through the season or toward the end of the season, we're having a Sam Darnold-ish conversation about Daniel Jones. He wins the job. It's a decent situation. I still think Shane Steichen, I think he's a good offensive coach. We're just 1 year removed from him, to get with Gardner Minshew as the quarterback, making a playoff push or being in playoff contention right up until the end of the season. There's a world where we're talking about Daniel Jones. Is he worth $30 million? Is he worth $35 million at the end of the year? So I'm trying to paint the picture of what this looks like. Daniel Jones, if he wins this job, goes out there. We've said we think it's the best situation he's been in. I think the Colts offensive line has more question marks than it's had in recent years because of turnover there, but it's still decent. And a good group of playmakers, including first-round pick Tyler Warren. So you've got a really nice trio of wide receivers, a fourth with A.D. Mitchell as a wild card, Tyler Warren, Shane Steichen calling plays. I think either guy is set up for some level of success, whether it's Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. But there's really a world where Jones wins the job, and halfway through the season, the Colts are sitting there. They're 7-3 or 6-4. It's like, I don't know. Maybe Daniel Jones is the future in Indianapolis.
Yeah, no, there is. I mean, I think that's real. I don't know. Yeah, again, I think that puts them into some difficult situations heading into next offseason if that's the way it goes. But I think that's absolutely, like, in this competition, even assuming Anthony Richardson stays healthy in training camp, I think I would, like, if I was a bookie, I would label Daniel Jones as the favorite. I think he's the most likely guy to win the job if it was an honest, battle where it's being done on merit. It's not, though. Like, I think the team wants Richardson to win this job. So if it's 45-55 in favor of Daniel Jones, they'll probably still give the job to Richardson. Like, Jones needs to win this conclusively throughout training camp, I think, to be given the job. Or Richardson needs to, be injured enough again that they're like, look, even if we want him to win the job, we can't trust him going forward. We're going to give it to Jones from that perspective.
On the Richardson side, I've said before, I said, look, if Jones does win the job, I'm another team, especially a team that needs a quarterback in the future, like the Jets say. I'm calling about Anthony Richardson, right? The Jets, as in they've got a bridge quarterback in Justin Fields. Even if he does great, I'm going to buy low on Anthony Richardson. I would absolutely do that. I made the point of somewhere in this offseason that he's had a third of the snaps or the third of the dropbacks as Bo Nix, rookie last year, a third of the dropbacks between college and the NFL. And when we talk about player development and QB development and how much they just need time sometimes. And look, Jaden Daniels, did he hit the ground running as a rookie? Yes. He was a 5-year starter between Arizona State and LSU. Yeah. Did Josh Allen take 3 years before he figured out? Yes. And he had multiple years of starting at Wyoming. That's the tricky part with Anthony Richardson. I'm all about, sometimes you got to give up on a guy because you can't afford, like you're the Colts, you can't afford to be the team that waits for Anthony Richardson to develop. But as another team, it's like, all right, Colts, you guys gave him some reps. You guys gave him a little bit of experience. We'll take it from here and hope that we, catch lightning in a bottle with the buy low. That's the tricky part about the Richardson evaluation. Inconsistency, injury issues, but also just no experience. Like, I don't know if he should even be good at this point because he hasn't been on the field a whole lot.
All right, that's enough of that, Steve. Over 50% of the people listening to this are not subscribed right now. So click that button, and then we can get back to whatever it is Steve's telling you about. Yeah, I mean, if he doesn't win the job, like if Daniel Jones wins the job, you would feel that his time in Indianapolis is over. On the other hand, it does give you kind of a Bryce Young situation where you get to sit him down. I would assume it would work longer term, but like you can take the other track, right? Like they had to throw him in there as a starter and try and develop him on the field. When they drafted him, they would have at least a season to say, all right, you're not the starter, you're the backup now. We're going to work on you from the bench and see if we can see some obvious improvements and, dedicate, who knows if they would do this because the season is its own animal, but, try and actually commit some time and some effort into Richardson's development from the sideline and try and see if they can improve him that way. And then, maybe if they see some improvements throughout the season, they would feel better about giving him a shot next year or just keeping him around next year. If I'm another team, I agree with you. I'd be very interested in Anthony Richardson as a reclamation project, but I would be waiting until next offseason. Like take another year off his contract, effectively reduce his price. And then even if you have to trade for him, then it's a lower pick than it would be right now.
I see the chat discussing the merits of the Indianapolis roster. And I just want to reiterate here, if you're going back through the years, Daniel Jones, I don't believe has had a good offensive line at all. I mean, I think there was points where they crept back toward average when Andrew Thomas was healthy and playing his best at left tackle. But we're talking about a Colts team that does not, they have more question marks this year because they have two starting spots up for grabs as center and right guard, but a good bookend, two good bookend tackles. Bernard Ryman at left tackle, who continues to progress and get better. He's ready for a big payday. Braden Smith at right tackle, still very good. And then left guard Quentin Nelson, even though maybe the Hall of Fame trajectory is not as good, I still ranked him as the best guard in the NFL earlier this offseason. Still think he's excellent. So 3 out of 5 feel really good about. And then it's a battle at center and right guard between various players. I think that's way better than what Daniel Jones has had. You're talking 3 out of 5 is looking good, and there's, if a couple guys are average, you're talking about a top 10 offensive line for the Colts. If the center and right guard can be average-ish, you're talking about a top 10 offensive line. So there's that, and then the playmakers, as I said, Pierce as a deep threat, Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, one of the best slots in the NFL, and then bring in Tyler Warren. That is a nice group where if Richardson or Jones, whoever wins the job, is in position to have a nice season.
You never know, exactly how it looks on paper is going to play out on the field. But I think you could easily argue that this is the best offensive line that's been in front of Daniel Jones. It's the best receiving core that he's had to work with. It's the best running back that he's had to work with. That's right up there with Saquon Barkley, depending on the situation. Saquon Barkley in New York, not quite the same thing as Saquon. What's that?
Does it be careful?
It's just Saquon in New York is not quite the same thing as Saquon in Philadelphia, right? Because the line is not as different, not as good. So my Jonathan Taylor running behind the Colts offensive line, I think, is probably equivalent to Saquon Barkley running behind the Giants offensive line in New York, is the point I'm trying to make there. And then the coaching, I think, is at least on par with what he had in New York as well. So it's at least as good a situation in every possible component supporting the quarterback, and better in at least two of them than Jones has ever had to work with, right? 3 or 4 pillars of support. All of them are as good or better than he's ever had before.
You added in the tricky part of isolating how good the running back is versus the supporting cast. Well done explaining what you're saying, though, with Barkley and Jonathan Taylor. And look, Taylor hasn't looked the same as he did a few years ago, but still has the potential, like at his best, still very good. And in both guys, as we've said with Shane Steichen over the last couple of years, both quarterbacks, Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson, mobile. You can make them a part of the QB running game. I love the stat that I pulled in 2022 that Daniel Jones had the 20th most rushing yards in a season by a quarterback that season. For whatever it's worth, Daniel Jones did that, and that coincided with the best season that he had as the Giants quarterback, the best season that the Giants had with him under center. So, look, I always think probabilistically here, Sam, right? This isn't like if Daniel Jones wins the job and they win 4 games, I'm not surprised. If he wins the job and they make, their fringe playoff contender, I'm also not surprised. I'm just saying those are in the range of outcomes. Who do you think wins the job, though? Let's make a prediction here between Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. Prediction on the job itself. And, of course, when we get into the season previews, we'll make full predictions for each team.
I think Daniel Jones is going to end up being the week 1 starter. However it manifests, I think they're going to go into training camp wanting Richardson to win the job. And I think whether it's injury or whether it's simply Jones is too much better to let it stand, I think they're going to conclude week 1, Daniel Jones suits up.
For the sake of argument, I'm going to say Anthony Richardson wins the job. Look, we think in black and white terms far too often in sports media. Anthony Richardson has had very good games. He's had stretches of very good play. He's had stretches of awful play. And you're still working on this tiny sample size of college and NFL snaps. That it's just the reality. So I think you mentioned earlier, I believe they want Anthony Richardson to win the job to a point. I think there's a part of them that thinks, right? This is how coaches think. Just give me Daniel Jones. The guy runs the offense. He's dependable. I know what I'm going to get. Sure. Just give me him. I'm a great coach. I'll get 10 wins out of him. Coaches think like that. But I think the front office, the organization would love to have, in their perfect world, if they're painting a picture, Anthony Richardson takes a massive step forward, leans into the potential, the running ability, the downfield ability, and just cleans up some of the inconsistency as far as accuracy, and then the game-to-game inconsistency. His game against the Jets last year was outstanding. Had a 3-game stretch that was pretty good. He just hasn't had many 3-game stretches of even play, never mind good play. So I'll predict Anthony Richardson wins the job, and that they try to give him a shot. And if Daniel Jones ends up taking over, then that might be, we're sitting here in week 4 or 5 saying, okay, that's the end of the Anthony Richardson era. Now someone should buy low and see what they can get out of him.
And honestly, that might be the most realistic outcome of this thing, is that we're going to see both these quarterbacks during the season at some point. Like, they're just going to go back and forth between the two. Neither one of them is playing particularly well. Neither one of them is particularly a good quarterback, at least right now. And ultimately, the Colts are just like lurching from one substandard starter to the other throughout the course of the season.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.